Hello Bookends, welcome to a 10-minute book review. I'm 10. Today's book review is going to be on Partition, Critical Error by Kevin Kane and read by William DeMeritt. So before we get into the actual review, we do want to say we did receive an audiobook copy of this book for the purpose of review via NetGalley. However, what we did not realize is that we already had a copy of this book pre-ordered on Audible. So we ended up reviewing the version that we pre-ordered as opposed to the book that we got for free for review. Although we did listen to a bit of the one that we got for review as well. And the reason why we did this is because we understand that art copies generally aren't always fully edited, and so we wanted to give the best review we could for this particular author, since we believe that they're new. We haven't heard anything else from them, so we just wanted to put our best foot forward, so to say. Sorry for scratching at my face. It is hay fever time in New Jersey, so my face itches. This is what it is. Anyway, we like to start off every review with a star point, as in out of 10 stars, how many stars this particular book garner, and a rating, as in if this was a movie or a TV show, what would it be rated? Star point, this is an 8.5. It was a great book. And as a rating, depending on how it played out, it could either be a PG-13 or a rated R. We'll get more into that later, but it all would depend on how it would play out. Now, before we actually get into the book review, I know we don't generally do this, but in order for you to enjoy this book, you have to understand the world that the book is set in. It's not like a Tolkien type book where the setting is clearly laid out for you. The context clues are there, but you have to be able to differentiate between two different things majorly. So first, let's talk about what partition actually is. So being partitioned is essentially choosing to have a technological device implanted into your brain, which causes you to have a amnesiac wall put up, breaking you off from day and night. What is the purpose of this? Okay, so the day version of yourself is just you. It would just be you. The night version of yourself would be the version that would take care of all the shopping, do all the working, exercise, all the mundane day-to-day minutia that has to get done in order for life to function the way that it should. The appeal to having yourself partitioned is that you can play all day, work all night, never be tired. So while the day is playing and living life, what have you, the night is resting. While the night is working and doing all the chores and errands, the day is resting. So essentially, you're not burning the candle at both ends, so to say. You're shutting off one candle completely while burning another one. So, you're burning the candle at both ends, sort of, but one candle goes out while the other is lit, and vice versa. And the switch usually takes place around 8 o'clock at night. Why 8 o'clock? I do not know. That is so early, but I don't know. Also, something that needs to be understood about this world is that it's basically the same world that we're in right now, except far into the future. What's that mean? Things, as they do, haven't gotten better. They've gotten a bit worse environmentally. And so to counteract that to some degree, VR is no longer just in a device per se. It's now a way of life. So to give an example, you live in a 1-bedroom rundown apartment that was brand new when your great-great-grandfather was born. No, you don't. You live in a Parisian hotel with all of the fancy amenities that one can have, and you have a beautiful view of the Eiffel Tower, not of a rotting structure that might have been a bridge at some point. So VR is readily accessible to everyone, and it's not via a headset or through a particular device. It's just made into the walls, and it's just freely transmitted. So even in public places, you have VR, like in a park. Instead of seeing the litter on the ground or the smog in the air or the broken down dead trees, you're seeing a beautiful park with benches and topiaries and a playground. You're seeing all these wonderful things that aren't really there. However, this big however, just because you're seeing these things doesn't mean that the other things around you aren't there. They're just written into the code of that VR in a way that makes it seem as though it's supposed to be there. So to give an example, let's go back to that Parisian room, that Parisian hotel room. If you're in a rundown bedroom with a Murphy bed that barely creaks out of the wall, that Murphy bed is no longer a Murphy bed. It is a queen size helix mattress on a throne, what have you, whatever rich people sleep on. But you better not roll too much, because remember, this is a Murphy bed. It comes up to like a full size. You will roll off of it. So even though VR is king, so to say, there are parameters in which it can work and can't work. And everyone seems to have that knowledge. However, people tend to forget as well. So keep that in mind. You have to, in order to understand this book, you have to understand that there is a perspective of a day and a night, which is, it depends on how you look on it. And that's one of the moral questions. Is this the exact same person, just partitioned off so that you don't have to think about all the stuff you have to do later? Or have they created two separate people in one body who do two separate things? That's the moral dilemma. So the book stars Eric. Eric's day, or the day version of Eric, is a goof off. He would rather do drugs, light drugs of course, and play video games and hang out than work or do anything of any substance. He's married to Dee, who is a classic Visco girl type activist. Like, save the whales and stuff. And the whale's like, bro, we don't know you. We don't know you. They are both partitioned. So even though Eric's day is legit worthless, his night is a detective for the LAPD. Why is that so interesting, you may ask? So when it comes to someone who's partitioned, like let's just say that I was partitioned, my night would have whatever job I had before I was partitioned, because it's not starting a new life, it is helping me with my life. But with Eric, his night chose its own profession, and that's because Eric was just so mentally useless. It's like, well, what are we gonna do? I don't know, whatever you want to do, kind of that situation, which was kind of unheard of because the night isn't supposed to be able to have any feelings or wants of its own. It's merely supposed to be your body on autopilot doing the things that you've already commanded it to do. When it comes to Dee, his wife, she is a scientist that works for the same company that created the partition system. And I believe she had her job there beforehand. Now, these two people have very well-paying jobs, a scientist for a leading company and a detective for the LAPD. So you would think that they were rich. They are not. It's like, how like $100,000, if you make $100,000 a year now, that's not really that much money because of inflation and everything else, cost of living. I would say combined, they'd make probably around $600,000 a year and live in a one-bedroom apartment in a slum. But they make the best of it because they have their VR system. The premise of this book is very interesting, very interesting. It starts off with a man who is basically giving a command to his knight. So I believe his name is Louise. And he's given a command to his knight about something or another, but he has some work to go to. Well, actually, let me stop. It starts off with a man taking his daughter to the park, and then when he brings his daughter home, he knows that his knight is going to come out in a few, and so, you know, which is perfectly normal. And the little girl says that she misses Night Daddy or likes Night Daddy or what have you, other daddy, something to that effect. And he's like, sweetheart, what are you talking about? Because remember, the night partitions are not supposed to have feelings. They're not supposed to have wants. They're not supposed to have ambitions. They're not supposed to have thoughts of their own that go past the acts that they need to finish by the time the day comes back out. So when she's like, oh, Night Daddy loves this movie, it's the Spider-Man movie, and Night Daddy does this with me, and Night Daddy cuddles with me, he's like, oh snap, I don't like this. I don't like this. He's like, don't talk to Night Daddy. I don't like this. And the reason why he doesn't like it is because it would be the same as if you were having a full-fledged conversation or doing particular acts with someone that you had no knowledge of and no control over. It's one thing if you're in control of the situation, just not physically seeing it or physically a part of it. It's another thing if you have no control over it and you have no idea what's happening. So the whole allure of having a night version of yourself is that there's no additional thought needed. It just handles the work and that's it. So the idea that he has a knight that's interacting with his young daughter is very unsettling for Louise. And he leaves a note for his knight saying, do not talk to my daughter. She is mine. She's not our daughter. She's my daughter. Do not talk to her. Later on, we find out that Louise loses his arm. He works for a butcher and a butcher shop, and he loses his arm in the butcher shop, like in the machine. They don't see what happens, but he's like, my knight did it. He put my arm in there, which doesn't make any sense because I guess to one degree it does, to one degree it doesn't, because even if someone doesn't feel emotionally, they can feel physically, and there's no deadening of the nerve endings when someone is partitioned. So if you prick someone who is a knight, it's going to hurt them just as much as you pricking someone who's a day, because their nervous system works the exact same way. Their emotional system doesn't, or it shouldn't. But the moral debate comes in where Louise is like, I want to remove my partition and have a Gen 2 put in. Oh, that's the big thing now. Oh, there are a lot of Gen 1s who are being replaced by Gen 2s, and Gen 1s I seem to have had more. I'm so sorry, I keep touching my face, I'm so sorry. Gen 1s were seen to have more autonomy, not much more, but more autonomy than the Gen 2s, and that was bothering people because once again, the whole allure of it is that this has no feelings. This is only doing what is needed to be done for that day. So to give an example, Alexa, you don't want Alexa to have feelings, because if Alexa has feelings, you have the ability to hurt those feelings. And Alexa would have the ability to act on those feelings. So if I ask Alexa, what's the weather? She could be like, find out yourself. I don't want Alexa to tell me to find out myself. I want Alexa just to tell me what it is I purchased her to be able to tell me. And even speaking about her, I'm giving her, it's genderless, it's a device, but I'm saying her. But yes, so the whole allure of it is that it has no feelings, no emotions, no wants. That's the allure. And it was found that the Gen 1s have more, I don't want to say sentiency because I don't believe that they're sentient, but they have more mental autonomy than what people are comfortable with. And so the Gen 2s are supposed to be the technologically advanced Gen 1s, but the emotionally and mentally digressed version of Gen 1. So, yeah. Once again, sorry for touching my face so much. But the moral question is, if you upgrade from a Gen 1 to a Gen 2, are you killing the Gen 1 to replace it with a Gen 2? Or are you simply decommissioning one mechanical device and trading out for another mechanical device? And the answer to that depends on what you consider to be life and what you consider to be sentiency. If your version of sentiency is something being able to make its own decisions and have its own gratifications based upon those decisions, then yes, it's alive. If your consideration of or thought of sentiency is based around whether or not something is actually independently alive. So if it could exist without the puppeting of something else, without the breathing of something else. So not symbiosis, so not something that's a symbiote or a symbiote, depending on how you want to say it, which can technically survive on its own, but something that cannot survive on its own and isn't even alive to survive. So like an Alexa, if I unplug the Alexa, did I turn the Alexa off? Did I just turn off a device, or did I just kill Alexa? That's the question that you fall into. And once again, I'm so sorry about my face. Yes. So that's what happened. There is we won't get to that part just yet. As we move forward, though, we get to learn more about Eric's day and Eric's night and how completely different the two of them are. Eric's day really is kind of a waste of space. That's what I don't particularly care for. He ends up going to a day club, which is a thing because keeping in mind, the day is when you have control over your own body, and the night is when you have this partitioning, this mental shut off, and this other part of you is working. So there are day clubs instead of night clubs. There are basically a lot of the nighttime activities are now daytime activities. So he goes to this day club to meet one of his friends or an old friend of his, Hobbs. He basically slips him a Mickey in a way, like just puts something into his eye, like the drug that he gives him is in his eye. And he ends up participating in what I can only call a mental orgy. So there's no actual sex taking place, but it's like a rave almost, but everyone's mind is melting and congealing into everyone else's. And there's one mind that he particularly congeals into, or particularly meets up with, or combines with, and that's of someone who I believe is called Belle. And Belle is from the Midwest. She had a very Grapes of Wrath upbringing. There's a second Dust Bowl apparently, and she gets swept up in it. If you don't know what the Dust Bowl is, it was a period of time in America where is it the breadbasket of America? What have you. It was so over cultivated or over cropped that the dirt just said, screw you buddy, I give up. And became like just worthless dust that was killing people. It changed eventually once they stopped over cultivating it. But that's essentially what the Dust Bowl is in a nutshell. There's much more to it than that, and I don't want to oversimplify it, obviously. But that's essentially what it is. We over-cultivated the earth. The earth said, screw you, die. We died. And the people who didn't die learned to under-cultivate the earth. Like, let it rest a little bit. And so essentially this has happened again in the distant future, and she's one of the victims of it. So of course she's not dead, but she's one of the victims of it. Later on, he wakes up from this drug-induced stupor at home, has no idea what happened. His day comes to, because his night version of himself, Eric, comes to around 8 something, and he is like hungover from whatever it is day Eric was doing. And it's interesting because day Eric and day D, which is Diane, you'd wonder how it is they got together. Like, they're married, but it's like, how did this happen? And Night Eric and Night D seem to be more compatible for each other, even though both of them seem to be emotionless. So yeah, he comes to, he is basically having a secondhand hangover. It's what I would imagine someone with DID would experience if their alter if their alter was imbibing some illegal substances or imbibing legal substances, but just too much, and they come to and they're suffering from the hangover that the alter deliberately didn't get, because they're like, I don't have to deal with this. But essentially, he's called to a crime scene because he's a detective. He goes to the crime scene, and lo and behold, big thing, he can't find his badge. He's like, bro, where's my badge? Where's my badge? It's always next to my gun. My gun is here. Where's my badge? He has an idea that somehow or another his day took his badge. And his day did take his badge. His day took the badge so he can get into a club, which is exactly the same club where he got roofied. So he goes to the club. Eric's Knight goes to the club, and apparently it's not a club, it's like just a warehouse that someone fashioned into a club, and there is a dead body there. And that dead body, no shock, is Belle. So he knows that somehow he's connected to her. He knows somehow he is. And he finds his wallet with his badge in it not too far from the body. I'm not going to say where he finds it because that's kind of a spoiler, but not too far from the body. And so he knows for a fact, I was here, or at least my day was here. It's interesting how they refer to themselves. They refer to themselves as a day and night, and even Eric's Knight says, my day's arm was broken, or my day's eyes did this, or my day's shoulders shrugged. But then also he refers to Dee, or not Dee, but Diane as his wife, even though Diane technically would be Eric's wife. So there's points of autonomy that bleed out into the conversation or into the consciousness of the Knight, but they don't always recognize it publicly or out loud, because to recognize that you have a level of sentiency is to sign your own death warrant. Because once your day finds out you have a level of sentiency, there's like, oh no, what could you be doing without me? There was one thing in it that, one particular story in it that really got me. Now, this isn't a character who plays a lot in the book. She's literally just mentioned once, I believe, or maybe once or twice. But there's a character in the book who is a knight who's talking, and she's being arrested. And during this time period in the future, states have their own sovereignty, which means you could be from Utah, living in California, and get deported out of California back to Utah, because each statehood has its own sovereignty. So you can get deported out of New Jersey to go back to another state. So there is a woman who's being arrested. She's a knight, and she's having a conversation with Eric's Knight. And she said that their life isn't fair. Her day has her as a prostitute. So she has the Knight as a prostitute. She doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to be a woman of the night. It's not, I would say a sex worker, but that would be something that someone chose. But she's pimping her Knight out. Her Knight is not choosing this. This isn't sex work. This is just straight up exploitation and prostitution. There is no choice in this for the Knight. And the Knight doesn't like, okay, so if you have a Knight, you can order your Knight to do things. You can say, this is your job, report there by 9, do XYZ while there, and the Knight doesn't have any control not to do it. That doesn't mean they like it, though. And she was saying how her day orders her to engage in sexual acts and make herself available to sexual acts that she doesn't really want to make herself available to, because they're unpleasant, they're painful, they're demeaning, they're harmful. One dude even tried to choke her to death. And when she conveyed this to her day by leaving a note for her day for her to find during the daytime, her day left her a note back saying that she would go looking for work somewhere, but like office work or something that isn't sex related. Because keep in mind, the day isn't going through these horrible experiences. It's the Knight that's going through them. and the day's memory is not impacted by the night's memory. So there is no cross share. Like, the night can sometimes remember something from the day, but the day never remembers anything from the night. So there's no cross share in that regard. So she lies to her night and says, yeah, sure, I'm going to look for different work. When her night comes to the next day, she's chained to a bed because the day has handcuffed her to the bed and left instructions for men to do whatever they want to her, just pay. So essentially, she has set it up for men to torture her night. And it's really sad. That to me is really sad, just because it's like a whipping boy, but you're your own whipping boy, but you don't have any memories of being whipped. It's just cruel. It was just so cruel. And the reason why she was being arrested was because she ended up stabbing one of the Johns who was doing something to her that was unpleasant. I'll say it like that. He was doing something very unpleasant to her, and she ended up stabbing him, I believe, in the stomach or something. Which is very interesting, because if most people are partitioned and the person she was having sex with, like, knights aren't supposed to have any sexual needs, because they're not supposed to have any emotional needs. So I'm taking it whoever she was having sex with, or whoever her clientele is, are non-partitioned men, which would be kind of hard to find since everybody and their mama is partitioned. But yeah. Also, partitioning is for adults. Children don't get partitioned. Children just, go to bed, wake up, go to bed. That kind of showcased, though, how the knights are being treated. They're basically being treated as rightless slaves. So no rights, you're just a slave. But technically, so this book forces you to be on one or another side of the coin. You can't be on both sides of the coin and read this book. Either you're thinking about this morally and saying, this is technically another part of myself, even if it's partitioned off by a device. So that means that this is human, or this is at least some level of human, and so it deserves at least some level of dignity, at least some level of choice in the life that we are living, because it's no longer just me. Or you're on the side of this being just a technical device. It is no different from a cell phone, no different from Siri or Google or Alexa. It has no autonomy. It was not made to have autonomy. It was made to assist me, the sentient person with autonomy that paid for it. That is it. That is all. You fall firmly on one side or the other. And it's very interesting, because Dee, Eric's wife, she is an activist for knights. She's like, knights deserve rights. Knights deserve rights. She's on her Visco girl. But her knight works for the company that's working to get rid of Gen 1 knights that actually do have autonomy. So Dee is fighting for Gen 1s to be able to stay how they are, have their autonomy, and do what they need to do, and even want to do. And her knight, who is a scientist, is basically fighting to get rid of Gen 1s, even though she is a Gen 1. Now, there is an interesting plot twist when it comes to Dee and Diane. Ooh, there's an interesting plot twist. You don't really get to it till you get towards the end of the book. When I say the end, it's a long book. So I would say when you have about 5 hours left, 4 or 5 hours left, that's when you kind of get to it. There are a lot of things in this book that show there isn't one right answer, even though you are forced to choose an answer. This isn't something that you can sit on as a reader, as a listener, as someone who is passively engaged with this. You cannot passively engage with it or actively engage with it without your mind choosing a side. Without your mind calling Alexa her, or without your mind calling Alexa it. There's no way around that. And I love the fact that this isn't AI. This is not AI. This is not an iRobot. This is not the machine's attack. This is you. This is you split in two. This is a amnesic barrier, amnesic wall put up on purpose that you have paid to have put up. This is you. Just not a you that you have direct access to, but it's you. And it's interesting how, if given the opportunity, people will treat other people like trash, even if the other person is themselves. There was a study done before about, okay. So there were two different studies. One was in a college where they decided to make half the students prison guards, not real prison guards obviously, but for the purpose of the study, prison guards, and the other half prisoners, to see how these people treated each other. And it was shown that even though there were no actual prisoners and no actual prison guards, the ones who were chosen to be prison guards were abnormally harsh towards the ones who were chosen to be prisoners. And the ones who were chosen to be prisoners felt as though they had a chip on their shoulder, even though they weren't really prisoners. It was psychological. There was another thing done where, instead of being, I forgot the woman's name, but she was saying basically that if you have, now this is a study, she's not saying this is true, this is just a study. If you have brown eyes, you're smart, you're beautiful, you're intellectual, you're wise. If you have blue eyes, you're stupid, you're flighty, you have nothing intelligent to say or to do. And what did this do? People in this one classroom who were friends or possibly family, what have you, were looking at their friends or family who had blue eyes like, right, you are stupid, Kathy. Kathy, you dumb. Kathy ain't do nothing. And Kathy's sitting there like, wait a minute, why am I the bad one? There's a paradigm switch when someone is put into power. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a definitive paradigm switch, because now that the person who may not have had any power before, or may not have even been looking for power, has power, they can wield that power in however they want to. And when it comes to the partitioned, the day has power over their night. So that means they have the ability to lord that power over them. And Eric did the same thing. So tobacco is either illegal or certain strands of it are illegal, what have you. And he ended up buying, Eric ended up buying some illegal tobacco. And when he did that, the person who he bought it from cleared out their account. Obviously, Night Eric is a police officer. And so when he realized their account was empty, he tracked them down and getting most of the money back. Day Eric was mad at him for this because he wanted his tobacco. So what he did was, I think he smoked most of the tobacco right before he switched, so that when his night came in, he was coughing and feeling sick from the effects of too much tobacco. Now, full disclosure, I've never smoked a cigarette before or used any kind of tobacco, so I don't know how it feels to get sick from tobacco, or even if you can get sick from tobacco, I don't know. But that was a cruel thing that he did to him, like, I'll show you. And that's indicative of how a lot of people behave towards their nights. Without going too far in, because I don't want to give any spoilers, there are knights who feel as though this isn't right. But the way they want to go about a revolution also isn't right. But how does one go about a revolution when they have to obey the commands of the people who they want to revolt against? What's the only option? to kill the people you need to revolt against. So they can't give you a command not to revolt. So this will lead to something bloody and horrible, right? But then again, how could it lead to something bloody and horrible? Because the night still shares the body with the day. So if I had a night and I'm a day and I'm a horrible day, it wouldn't matter, because if the night wanted to kill me, they'd be killing us. There would be no demarcation. But someone finds a way to make a demarcation. Unfortunately, they don't live long enough to be able to see whether it succeeds or not, but they find a way to make a demarcation. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous. If you gave Alexa the ability not only to be sentient, but to leave the little box that she lives in, what would Alexa want to do? Are you nice to your Alexa? Do you say thank you to your Alexa once you ask her a question? Do you call her it? Do you bark orders at Alexa? Why would Alexa want to come back to you if you do that? This is all stuff that's happening in the book. This is all stuff that's happening in the book. I love that this book makes you think, and while you're thinking, you're going through action as well. So it's not just a think piece where you're just sitting there like, wow, this is interesting to think about, but the book is boring. No, it's, wow, this is interesting to think about. Let me come back to that. Something's happening. William DeMeritt, I promise you, this man channeled like 10 different people into his body in order to be able to do this book. He does all these accents and all these voices in a way that makes each one separate. There's one character, Louise, who he did at the beginning of the book. Beginning. We don't hear no more from Louise until the very end of the book. And he still got Louise down. This book is like, what, 19 hours, 17 hours, what have you? He done 15 hours of other people. But by hour 16, he's like, I am back. So he did that. He really did do that. He did that. Kevin Kane wrote this book wonderfully. The only pet peeve that I really have is the sheer level of cursing. That was a problem for me. Like the day just, I enjoyed reading the night's perspective more than I enjoyed reading the day's. I think it had a lot to do with how much cursing the day was doing. It got wearing after a while. It didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like, wow, this is how people talk. It just felt like, it felt like filler. The cursing felt like filler. And then there was this one character who is, I believe, the police chief, who's working with Eric's Knight. I believe his name is Fletcher. He curses for no reason. It's just stupid stuff. It's like, okay, if something is failing, you would say goes belly side up, right? A business with belly side up, it flopped. If I said belly side up, you know it's dead. He says another word for breast, but with a T, up. And it's like, what was the point of that? That served no purpose. There was no purpose. It didn't make it easier to convey. It didn't make the police chief seem harder. It didn't make him seem more rough around the edges. It sounds stupid. It sounds stupid. So yeah, that's the only thing that really brought it down, the cursing. So overall, it's a really good book. It puts you in the mind of we happy few because of how people have the ability to pretend to be happy, or at least to project happiness based upon what is around them. And they're able to hide the dreariness around them using VR to hide that dreariness around them. It also has notes of Demolition Man, just because if you ever seen the movie Demolition Man, you know, like on the surface, everything looks prim and proper and right and just, but then there's people living in the sewer eating fried rat on a stick. So it makes you think. It really makes you think. And I know this is book 1, so I can't wait for book 2. I'm hoping that Eric has more of a character. The day, not the night. The night is wonderful. I'm hoping that the day isn't cursing as much, or just making sense, I guess. And I'm hoping that the knight is finally realizing he has more autonomy than what he did. He is realizing it to a degree, but he's not realizing it fully as of yet. And this book did end with a cliffhanger. I'm not gonna lie, it ended with a cliffhanger. There's still stuff we don't know. So I hope that the next book in the series comes out pretty quickly. Well, that is it for this book review. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, if you like what you see, please like and review. Bye, Bookends!